So, delighted to be here today on the occasion of the World Sight Day 2020 under the auspices of Sankara Academy of Vision. I intend to speak to you today on this topic of leadership and its relevance to the healthcare sector. Given my background, I have engaged and worked with leaders in different sectors, mostly in the corporate business world, but also in the social sector, hospitality sector, healthcare sector, and many other business, financial sectors, and many sectors of that kind. And what I have found is leadership is one thing which is sector agnostic. It is indeed something which is experienced and demonstrated in all walks of life, starting in the smallest unit of a family. It is seen and demonstrated in the community and in the larger political and global ecosystems as well. So I intend to today share with you my perspectives on leadership, the development of leadership, and the impact that leadership has in its surroundings. I would like to define leadership in a very simple way. You are a leader when your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and be more. So anything that inspires others to emulate or to follow their dreams or to go after and make an impact in their surroundings, I think is something that comes out of a leader. And leaders sometimes are nominated or appointed as a manager in an organization. Or some other times they're elected in the community or in the country, as you see panchayat leaders, political leaders getting elected. Equally, there are leaders who volunteer and show up by themselves, not because somebody has elected them or selected them. They just volunteer to show up as leaders. And when I say they volunteer to show up as leaders, it means that they volunteer to act responsibly, to impact in a positive manner and inspire others towards a goal or a vision and make a positive difference in their surroundings. That's what leaders do. And therefore, leaders in this definition are to be seen in every level of the organization. They are not necessarily the CEO of the company. They are not necessarily the managing director or the principal medical advisor. They are indeed anybody who decides to act responsibly and inspire responsible, positive action amongst others. So when you look at leaders and leadership in this fashion, the question then comes saying that, how does this happen? Does this happen automatically? Do we wait for leaders to evolve apart from those whom we nominate? I think the answer lies in terms of what is the prevalent culture in the ecosystem, be it the family, the community, the hospital, or the country. Depending on the culture, it encourages people to take on leadership-like positions, leadership-like approaches, leadership-like behavior. And this culture is something that encourages people to stand up and be themselves. This culture encourages people to learn and experiment. This culture encourages and empowers people to be themselves and to make a difference. This culture does not again happen automatically. It is something that is created by the value system of the organization, by some conscious efforts by the management or leadership of the organization. So as you can see, it's a chicken and egg kind of a syndrome. Leaders create cultures, and cultures in turn creates leaders. So it's a virtuous cycle, as it were. And what a great thing it would be if organizations had bequeathed a culture which kept creating more and more leaders amongst its ranks. And that would ensure that this organization is full of leaders, has got a bench strength of people willing to act responsibly and make a positive difference. It is that kind of an organization which ends up being sustainably successful. Not successful during the term of a single leader, but because they have multitude of leaders getting evolved in the system organically, what happens is the success in that organization continues to be alive, and it reinvents itself depending on the situation, and the organization then indeed becomes successful in every context, in every situation. So it's a very utopian kind of a thought and a vision. If this is true, what should organizations do to indeed create such a culture? Indeed, encourage the evolution of more and more leaders. So I think leadership development as a process is something that many organizations invest in. In my view, leadership development needs to be seen in three planes. The first one is leading self is the element that needs to be focused on. For leaders, know to lead themselves first. And the second plane is the plane of leading others, where leaders, apart from leading themselves, need to lead others. And this involves maybe leading a very small team, maybe just leading one other person, or just simply influencing and interacting and inspiring another. The third dimension of leadership is leading the organization. And by the organization, I mean a larger unit. It could be a department, it could be an entire hospital, it could be the ecosystem of the healthcare sector in the country, or it could be the country itself. So leadership can be developed on all these three planes, and it needs to happen in a sequential fashion. So organizations tend to spend time in helping people develop themselves as individuals. And the focus here is helping people to be clear in their thought, focused in their action, prioritized in their behavior and management of their time, and most importantly, confident, and confidence arising from their own capability. Therefore, organizations should end up recruiting people with good attitude and willingness to learn and inculcate these things so that they become successful leaders of themselves. And then opportunities are created, people are encouraged to assume responsibilities within the community, within the organization. And to be successful in leading others, the focus, development, attention is given to how to make people sensitive to others. How do you create and build and nurture trust amongst people? How do you work in a collaborative fashion? And how do you demonstrate integrity in everything that you do? These elements make a person successful as a leader of others. And the demonstration of successful leading of self and successful leading of others brings people to the doorstep of leadership in the organization. And that's when the organization starts recognizing people with leadership capabilities. It is the demonstration of the foregoing which leads to giving opportunities to people to lead larger teams and larger portions of the organization. And at this level, the leadership development is around helping people lead with a shared purpose, not with an individual own agenda, but an agenda that is created, an agenda that is shared, an agenda that is subscribed to by the larger community. So creating and leading a shared purpose is one of the significant development elements in a leader at an organizational level. Authentic behavior is a very important element in a successful leader at the organizational level. That requires a certain amount of self-awareness, a certain amount of sensitivity, and a certain amount of being able to be present without being conscious about it. An unconscious, authentic presence is what makes a very successful leader at an organizational level. And the third element is compassion. And compassion here is not charity. Compassion here is really about knowing the other person's reality, showing interest in getting to know about others, and being able to do things which help others to help themselves overcome their challenges and benefit by the opportunities that exist around them. The compassion towards others and their realities. And the fourth, very important one is commitment to the organization, commitment to its people, and commitment to its cause. That's the fourth element which makes a leader highly successful at an organizational level. Having described leadership in these three planes and the elements that make leaders successful in each of these three environments, the question then begins, so how do we create these leaders? How do we develop these leaders? What kind of models or modules or methods do we have for encouraging and supporting leadership development? I think there are many, and I think the most popular one is in terms of a leadership development training program. And most organizations invest in that. And a training program exposes potential leaders to the theory and the examples of leadership. That helps them to become aware of what it takes to be a good leader. It helps them to sort of emulate what examples show as to how others have behaved. So that's a good way of introducing people to leadership, and it's a good first step in leadership development. But that alone does not help, because quite often we know that people go for training programs, learn some things, come back to the real life and get stuck in the day-to-day routine and don't get the opportunity to try out what they learned. Or sometimes they are even a little hesitant and afraid of trying out something which they have never tried out before. And that's when what is required is a little bit of support from the leaders within the organization. And when I say leaders within the organization, again, it's not the CEO. It could be your immediate line boss, or it could just be your colleague who is willing to guide you, who is willing to encourage you, who is willing to appreciate you. And those things help you to take the first baby steps in terms of trying out some of the leadership behaviors of, for example, being able to express what you're thinking. So the clarity of thought, not just in the thinking process, but in the communicating process. Your ability to sort of demonstrate your capability, the opportunity to go there and do it by yourself. And that gives you a certain amount of confidence, and that grows you as a leader as well. So the second thing is in terms of a certain amount of guidance and encouragement that's available in the system. And therefore you create buddies, you create a few senior colleagues who sort of help you intern with them, shadow them in their work, and learn, and then they let go of you to try out on your own while they are by the side, sort of being there to just give you the security. And the third thing is really in terms of giving you feedback, in terms of how you are doing. And who better to give you feedback than your seniors and your line bosses? So they need to give you feedback, and the feedback needs to be in a reinforcing way. When you make a mistake, of course they need to point it out, but equally, if they can only ensure that you also get to hear what's the right way of doing it, it helps. And feedback at the opportune moment of time, feedback with the right context, and feedback with the right amount of support is what makes it valuable. So the culture of giving feedback is a very important thing to develop future leaders. And the next thing is mentoring. And mentoring is something that is done by leaders within the organization. People who are already sitting in positions of leadership, who are leading the organization, take time to sit and talk to future leaders, the youngsters in the organization, the potential leaders. And the talk is about what they have gone through. How did they develop themselves? What were their early steps? What were the initial hiccups that they had to overcome? And how did they overcome all of that? And how did they make themselves into successful leaders? This kind of a sharing in a very open and transparent manner is what we call as mentoring. And sharing their stories of challenge and success helps the young leader to gain confidence and take courage to step up there and try out things on their own, and thereby giving the opportunity for their own leadership to sort of blossom. And finally, the element of coaching is something that needs to be embraced in organizations. And what do we mean by coaching? Coaching, unlike mentoring, is not about telling them how the leader did it, but it is about inviting the potential leader to think for themselves, to explore the opportunities and avenues, to sort of experiment with their ideas, and to sort of figure out what works best for them in their leadership behavior and causes the right impact in their environment, and then embrace it as their leadership style. So coaching is not telling, and coaching is not about guiding. Coaching is really about encouraging people to think for themselves, reflect a little bit, to sort of go out there with an action plan and try out things, seek feedback, and to course correct and build themselves. But to do that, you need the facilitation of a good coach who is there committed to the development of the person being coached. And that coaching behavior is something that leaders need to build and demonstrate, because that is what allows the person to fully flower. It's like the transformation of the caterpillar into a butterfly. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by training programs. It doesn't become a butterfly because somebody is telling it how they did it. The caterpillar has to go through its own pangs of pain, the challenges of squeezing itself out of the cocoon, and it has to come out and start finding its own flight. And that is the process of coaching. Not going there and saying, I'm trying to help them and handhold them. There is a time for handholding. There is a time for telling. There is a time for helping. But coaching, and that's why I put it at the very end, when you have given them the training inputs, when you have guided them through the early rungs, when you have mentored them with your stories, and now when you are giving them the platform to experiment, act like a coach. Give them the freedom to try it out, to learn by doing, gain the confidence, and blossom into a full-blown flower. That's the way leadership development happens. And therefore, Coming to the health sector, how is it any different? You will recruit people in all lines of work. You recruit doctors, you recruit nurses, you recruit attendants, you recruit staff, you recruit people who manage the customers, you recruit people who manage the logistics. And all of these people need to learn on the job, irrespective of however much they might have been qualified before. And therefore, there's a learning within the organization. They need to learn the values with which your organization works, the philosophy, the ethos. And what better way to learn it than through guidance and mentoring and coaching. And you need to learn to do things which sort of reinvents the organization to become relevant in the future as well as the emerging present. And all of that requires leadership development at every level. And leadership development through these multiple methodologies is what helps them to really grow. And when you do this, you need to remember that everybody grows and develops through a simple process. And I call this process the I can process. The I stands for there needs to be an intent or an interest for people to be something. And that's the beginning step. The second is the C. I can see is about they need to be aware of the change that they wish to make in themselves or in their environment. And then they need to act. A is for action. And they need to act to make the change come true. And then the new behavior or the new environment is born. That's the end. So I can is the process through which any change or development takes place. So I say, even better methodology is I too can methodology. So the intent should be inspired, and that inspiration needs to come from leaders within the organization. If you can inspire others to have an intent or an aspiration by your role modeling, that's a great way of generating the intent to build and develop in a big way. So the I2 is intent supported by inspiration. Change needs to be clarified. What is the change that you want? And the clarification comes with a certain amount of challenge about the change that people wish to make for themselves, ensuring that there is sufficient commitment to the change that they're trying to make. That's the 2C, change with commitment. And the action that one is wanting to take to develop and build needs to be aligned to the change that you're seeking for yourself. So action with alignment is the 2 A's. And the new norm that you're trying to create for yourself, thanks to this change that you're bringing about, needs to become a very natural self. It needs to become unconsciously new. The new norm needs to just happen without us being consciously trying to do it. So the natural transformation of the new norm is the 2 N's. So the I2 can is simply put intent supported by inspiration, change pursued with commitment, action clearly aligned to the goal, the new norm transforming into a natural habit is the I2 can principle. The I2 can principle, if it has to work, leaders in the organization need to take responsibility for helping every individual to pursue their journey of I2 can. And that calls for time, effort, and commitment from the leaders. Apart from doing their day jobs of surgeries or administration, they need to set aside time to build the right culture in the organization. They need to set aside time to spend with the youngsters and the potential leaders of tomorrow within the organization, and encourage this I2 can process. Focus on the leadership development principles and make sure leaders of self move to becoming leaders of others, and leaders of others move to become leaders within the organization. That's the process through which leadership development will happen. And you need to have training programs. You need to have buddies who will guide. You need to have people who will act as mentors. And you need leaders who are willing to push. It is through all of this that we will build the leaders of tomorrow. And this is as much applicable to the healthcare sector as to any other sector. I hope this has sort of triggered interest amongst you to know a little more about leadership development, but this is just an introductory talk. And more importantly, commit yourselves to developing your leadership and developing leadership amongst others in your own ecosystem. Thank you.